Hello there. So it's Tuesday 9:15 and I'm back on my Good Enough Mum page. And today what I wanted to talk about was all about our expectations and how they can actually cause us problems, cause us anxiety. When I was training to be a counsellor, obviously it was a great learning experience, and we would spend time discussing our attitudes towards things. And one of my friends said to me, after getting to know me quite well, she said, "You know, Jo, I think what's happening with you is you have it's your expectations, and they're causing you quite a lot of grief." And it's taken me a long time to really let that sink in, what she was saying to me, and to understand what she meant by that. And it's really how I think for many of us, those of us that suffer from feeling that we're not good enough, is what we're doing about our expectations and how we're setting our expectations, and especially our expectations of ourselves. And that can actually flow into our expectations of others and of life itself. And there is that sort of inbuilt thought in us that when we encounter problems, we sort of think it shouldn't really be like this. We have an expectation in us that our lives should run smoothly. We have an expectation that we should be good enough, perfect, to be able to cope with any of life's problems. And that causes us quite a lot of suffering and anxiety. And so I think it's helpful to actually think to ourselves, in what way am I setting my expectations too high? And often we can feel that we've let ourselves down, or that we've let other people down, or indeed that life has let us down. And that causes us a lot of suffering. And so I think it's really important to examine what our expectations of life are, and to ask ourselves, am I expecting perfection here? And I think if we can recognise that perhaps we are expecting life or ourselves to be perfect, that we can also recognise that we're finding it hard too, that we're actually suffering as part of that process. And I think it can be quite helpful in recognising that we're finding things hard, and that this is part of what life is about, is to actually find room there to be kind to ourselves and to think, actually this is hard and I am expecting myself to respond better to it. I was just listening to a talk this morning by someone, and she was saying that she has a sort of double process that goes on. She feels sick, and then she feels bad for not being a better sick person, because when she's sick she feels irritable and she's less patient with people. So there's the actual experience of sickness. Apparently the Buddha says that's the first arrow. And the second arrow is her feelings about her sickness and how she's behaving in it. And that makes her feel less worthy, and she isn't very kind to herself. So I wonder if we could apply that to our lives as well, and to think, in what ways am I responding to life and making it harder for myself? And that it's in that area that we're actually causing ourselves more suffering. And so there's a very good writer called Kristin Neff who talks about self-compassion. And she says two things. She says there is a universal sound of compassion. And compassion is that really, the sound of compassion is that really soft, calm voice. The one that sort of goes, ah, and can really empathise with us. And it's really helpful for us to be able to empathise with ourselves, to recognise when we're going through a hard time. And Kristin also says that touch is really important as well. And one of the things that the self-compassion teachers will tell us to do is to hold our hand against our heart, because that's a sort of soft touch that we often need. And so we can hold our hand against our heart and be compassionate towards ourselves when we're going through a hard time, to recognise that life isn't perfect, and that we're not perfect, and that sometimes it is going to be hard, and to sort of get alongside ourselves and to recognise that about ourselves. You know, this is hard. You're going through a hard time at the moment. But sometimes it's really difficult to do that. It's really difficult to imagine that self-compassion for ourselves because we don't feel that we deserve it. And there's a couple of things to say about that. And one helpful thing, if we're feeling that we're not deserving of self-compassion, perhaps because we've been angry, say we've been angry with one of our children, we feel that we don't deserve any kindness because we should have done better. It's really difficult to connect with ourselves then, to feel that we deserve any kindness. But perhaps it might be helpful in that sort of situation to go a bit deeper, to reflect on ourselves a little bit more deeply and to think, you know, why is the reason that I feel so upset that I've been angry with my child? And the reason the reason we feel so upset is because actually underneath that anger is a great deal of love, and that we really love our child. And it might be helpful to think about the love that we feel for our child, and to think about all the things that make us love our child, about all the things that we actually really love about them. And that might help us to enter into a little bit more that sort of ability to be able to be a little bit kinder to ourselves. And the other thing that might help is sometimes it's really hard to be kind to ourselves. And we just can't do it. So another thing that might be helpful when we're holding our heart, when we're trying to be kind to ourselves, is if we can't do it for ourselves, is to imagine the kindest person that we know to be there with us. And that kind person might actually be wanting to give us kindness. And even if it's difficult to imagine a kind person, it can be really helpful if you can't think of anybody who could be that kind to you. Perhaps you could think of an animal. So perhaps, you know, a kind animal, a kind pet. So perhaps a dog or a cat, a hamster, anybody who might accept you unconditionally, who just love you for who you are, and that might be someone who could be with you and show you that kindness, to get alongside you so you can recognise that life is hard, it is difficult, you are going through a hard time, whatever's happening. And it's not to be pitying yourself, it's just to extend that sort of compassion that you would extend to your best friend. I'm sure if your friend was going through a hard time, you'd probably try and comfort them. It's just that it's so difficult for us to be our own best friends. But to imagine, just as you would be kind to someone that you love, that you can imagine that kindness being extended to you during this hard time. I hope that really helps you to get alongside yourself and to be kind. You know, I'm tapping my shoulder here above my heart to remind you that a soft touch can really help as well, and that soft voice. And perhaps I'll just leave you with that today. Just in finishing, I'd just like to say, if you want to hear more from me, I am publishing a blog every week, and if you go on to my goodenoughmum.com website, it's called thegoodenoughmum.com, you can sign up there to receive the updates of when I'm publishing the blog or anything else that I'm doing. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye.